Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into how English football transformed from a localized, literally crumbling enterprise into the multi-billion-dollar global entertainment juggernaut we all know today. It's a wild story, honestly. It's full of incredible vision, incredibly high-stakes gambles, and this relentless pursuit of profit that forever altered the landscape of global sports. Let's get into it. We actually start our story at the absolute climax of billionaire investment. Picture this. It's 2012. Manchester City wins the title, and commentator Martin Tyler perfectly captures the unbelievable drama as City snatches the trophy right from their crosstown rivals, Manchester United, with two crazy stoppage time goals. But what's really fascinating here isn't just the sport, it's the money. This historic moment was fueled by an explosive influx of state wealth. We're talking over £1 billion of investment following a 2008 takeover. It completely changed the game forever. But to really understand how we arrived at this level of financial superpower, we have to rewind the clock. Section 1. Before the billions. To truly grasp the billions, we need to take a hard look back at the gritty, chaotic reality of English football in the 1980s. This era was unfortunately defined by incredibly dark days and truly tragic events. The 1985 Hazel Stadium disaster resulted in 39 deaths and actually led to English clubs being banned entirely from European competitions. And then the 1989 Hillsborough disaster happened. It was a horrific tragedy that finally forced the government and footballing authorities to wake up. They realized the old, decaying structures of the game weren't just holding the sport back, they were actively dangerous. The immediate fallout from these tragedies left clubs facing a practically impossible burden. They suddenly had to modernize these crumbling stadiums to ensure fan safety, and the government mandated the creation of all-seater stadiums to prevent any future crushes. But here was the massive problem. The money simply wasn't there. Gate receipts alone could never fund these kinds of expensive renovations. So English football was staring down a severe safety crisis and a severe financial crisis, all at the exact same time. That brings us to Section 2, the Great Breakaway. Because right in the middle of this chaos, the biggest clubs saw a moment of immense opportunity. Led by the top brass at Manchester United and Arsenal, elite clubs basically staged a corporate coup. They decided to break away from the traditional football league to hit three distinct financial goals. Step 1, escape the highly restrictive system of sharing television revenues with the lower division clubs. Step 2, generate the massive funds they desperately needed for those mandated stadium safety renovations. And Step 3, capitalize on the global marketability of their elite teams. To maximize profits, they knew they needed autonomous control. This caused a fundamental shift in the sport's entire structure. It was a total 180. On one side, you had the old First Division, an archaic system that shared revenues across all leagues and kept live TV exposure incredibly low to protect local matchday ticket sales. On the other side, you had the new Premier League. This was a profit-driven, autonomous entity where clubs held the voting power, and they were hyper-focused on securing massive, exclusive television deals. Make no mistake, it was a purely capitalist venture designed to build wealth at the very top. Moving on to Section 3, the television gamble. Now, to pull off a breakaway of this scale, you need cash. A lot of it. £2 billion. That is a staggering amount of money, right? Well, before making a massive bet on securing the exclusive television rights to this new league, media mogul Rupert Murdoch's B.S. Kaiby satellite television company was literally drowning in £2 billion of debt. His company was struggling to convince viewers to buy satellite dishes, and they desperately needed a miracle product to save the business. So Murdoch took this absolutely monumental risk. He decided to move English football from public terrestrial broadcast straight to a private satellite paywall. Now, this was a radical shift for the British public at the time. But you know what? That exclusive television deal ultimately saved his company and showered the newly formed Premier League in unprecedented cash. The symbiotic relationship between the Premier League and satellite television was officially born right there. Section 4. Building a global brand. Spoiler alert, the TV gamble paid off spectacularly, allowing the Premier League to pretty much conquer the world. The league's entire strategy shifted almost overnight. While local matchday crowds were definitely still the visual heartbeat of the game, the real financial strategy pivoted. They started marketing the greatest show on earth to millions and eventually over 1 billion overseas viewers. The Premier League recognized very early on that its true financial future lay in international broadcasting, tapping into massive new markets, from North America all the way to Asia. To put this financial explosion into perspective, just look at the unbelievable growth of overseas revenue. Initially, it was just a tiny fraction of the domestic revenue, but then it absolutely skyrockets, eventually hitting an incredible £3 billion by the 2016 to 2019 cycle. The sheer volume of wealth being generated here is it's absolutely staggering. But hey, the clubs didn't just sit back and count the TV money. They ruthlessly pursued commercial avenues. What started with Liverpool's very first shirt sponsorship by Hitachi back in 1979 evolved into an absolute gold rush. We saw massive kit manufacturing deals, like Manchester United's whopping £24 million annual agreement with Nike in 2002. Add in worldwide preseason tours and a massive surge in global merchandise sales, and suddenly these historic local institutions were transformed into multi-billion-dollar global brands. Naturally, all this unprecedented global exposure and extreme profitability acted like a magnet for a completely new kind of investor, incredibly wealthy foreign owners. We're talking individuals like Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich, who purchased Chelsea in 2003, and Emirati royal Sheikh Mansour, who bought Manchester City in 2008. These owners injected massive amounts of private and state wealth into the league. They could instantly buy title-winning superstars, which completely inflated the global transfer market.
Which brings us to Section 5. The wealth gap widens. Because as you might guess, in a story of unchecked commercialization, not everybody wins.
This tidal wave of cash essentially created an insurmountable wealth gap. At the very top, you have the elite Big Six, enjoying Champions League television money, massive global fan bases, and endless billionaire investments. But at the bottom, lower-tier clubs are still heavily reliant on local matchday ticket sales. They face the constant looming threat of administration and bankruptcy, basically fighting over the financial scraps that fall from the Premier League table. In fact, the financial drop-off from getting relegated out of the Premier League became literally so severe that they had to invent a completely new system, parachute payments. Because Premier League squads had become so unbelievably expensive to maintain with these massive wage bills, this quasi-welfare system of multi-million-pound payments was created simply to act as a safety net. It was literally the only way to keep relegated clubs from folding entirely the second they lost that sweet television revenue. So what actually happens when a club mismanages this huge financial risk? Well, look no further than the tragic collapse of Leeds United in the early 2000s. Leeds gambled heavily on top-flight European success, taking out massive loans. When they failed to qualify for the Champions League and got relegated, they faced devastating financial ruin. They were forced to sell off all their best players and endure years of painful struggling in the lower divisions. It served as a really stark warning to the rest of the football pyramid.
At the end of the day, this intense, hyper-corporate shift has deeply alienated a lot of the local, working-class fan bases. The exact people who built these clubs in the first place. They've had to deal with rapidly rising ticket prices and intense corporatization. This tension actually boiled over recently in the disastrous fan-protested attempt by the richest clubs to form a closed-off European Super League. It proved to a lot of people that, to the owners, the pursuit of profit often overrides the traditional community-based structures of the sport.
Which leaves us with a really tough thought to end this explainer on. Look, the Premier League undeniably produces spectacular sporting magic and incredible drama on the pitch. But as we reflect on the widening wealth gap, the alienated local fans, and the absolute dominance of billionaire investment, we have to ask ourselves, has the relentless pursuit of billions cost the beautiful game its true community soul? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep exploring and always keep questioning the systems behind the sports we love.